Okay, so we're going to go through a concept called the Agility Times. It's a newspaper. And what I'd like to do is take you through some aspects of agility in terms of the CDO brief and the challenge of that brief. So, Agility Times, Wednesday, March the 16th. £1.25, that's good value, I think, for most of us in the data space. So I think one of the comments that the chair mentioned is about the Gulliver syndrome. So is CDO credibility really at stake? Well, the reality is that we're in an era, according to Steve Factor, of the massive decline of PCs and society's shift from creation to consumption. The mass extinction of unnecessary computer work. Now, I don't know how many of you out there are involved in the throes of the data agenda, but there's a lot of unnecessary work in the data agenda today, which will change just in the same way as this quote illustrates. We are moving from the creation dystopia of Judge Dredd to the consumption utopia of the Jetsons. Data disciplines still today remain data creation obsessed. We create data at an alarming rate, often for no real purpose or reason. And we still, even today, in many tier one organizations, look at an inside-out view of the world. We're not considering the outside in. Consumption now, with the advent of big data, is all about straight-through processing. It's about bypassing many of the command and control structures, bypassing many of the handoffs, and putting control of the data agenda in the hands of the business workers themselves. Now, that is a massive challenge, because that means that we have the challenge of delivering agility, but at the same time, we have a fundamental challenge of quality assuring that as governance CDOs. So you may have seen this recently in cloud tech. It talks about 1 billion tiny robots in the cloud and the future of AI in an algorithmic world. Well, the reality is that sensor-based information, geospatial information, social data, and many of the event-based pieces of information that we have to process going forward are inherently unstructured. And the skills that we have today inside organizations are predominantly structured in nature. Decades-old infrastructure will struggle to feed algorithms in the cloud. And what it describes here is, are we moving from a subprime to an Optimus Prime crisis? Well, I think we possibly are. The recent illustration of the Google driverless car, which is an advent of AI, didn't make very good decisions with that bus recently, did it? Which proves that AI hasn't quite worked into the machinations of the average bus driver. So there's a way to go, and I think the focus on having AI at critical points and running algorithms to accelerate decision times is all about solving one problem well rather than 100 problems poorly. And of course, we know that we need to increasingly automate insight. Decision times are dropping rapidly, as this chart represents. To compete, the decision times actually will need to become almost instantaneous. And whether that's a screening process or a credit check or really, quite frankly, making the right decision with a customer through an escalated call, the decision times now are in microseconds. I'm not sure when you last looked at your data architecture behind the scenes, but I'm very sure it doesn't operate in microseconds for very many use cases. So cognitive technology and AI can deliver the decision, but it cannot deliver the supporting context for that decision. Technology needs to bridge this gap from insight to action. Today, data scientists with business acumen and bridging technology are two key areas of demand, and at the moment, demand that is very difficult to fulfill. So it's about bridging the context gap, the context gap between insight and action is the fundamental challenge for the CDO right now. And 50% of us will be unsuccessful, and yet 90% of organizations will have one by 2019. And so balancing agility and quality is key to success of the modern CDO. But CDOs, as mentioned, are new in most organizations. They are writing their own job descriptions from the ground up. For those of you that have been in those elevator situations or on the tube, where that person looks down at their phone and plays with apps endlessly with no connection, they're doing it because they're uncomfortable. They need to look busy, and that's what the CDO role feels like in the first few months. Defining a raison d'etre, a modus operandi, and remaining a la mode is too much without a CDO being the proverbial political polyglot. It's a difficult role to balance. And a more mature data-to-business strategy is required across most organizations. The grim reality is that business, data, and digital strategy are one, not three things. So today's agility is about minimum viable products, a concept that generally is alien to the world of data and in fact, very, very native to the world of digital. And yet data empowers a digital experience. We all know that. It needs to be there. For a frictionless digital experience, you need data agility behind the scenes. And yet we continue to fill this pyramid up from the bottom, pouring water into it, and we build foundations bottom up. Current data operating models build foundations. Future data operating models need to build slices. Actionable insight requires a minimal viable product and a vertical outcome, and then to expand that sideways. It's a fundamentally different approach.
Could you explain what an MVP is?
Minimum viable product. Apologies. So a minimum viable product, if we look at this example here, is about building the basic functionality with a sufficient level of quality to actually pilot something. So it's very much the way that a startup would work. And then to monitor and expand that continuously going forward, in my terms. Many, many other definitions. Thank you for that question. So I think if we look at a structure here that I deployed during my time at Zurich, it was a structure that looked to change the culture and operating model of the organisation. On the left-hand side, we have holacratic units. Holacratic units are flat, fairly hierarchical, hierarchy-less structures that focus on consumption outcomes. They focus on a business problem, and they are unwavering in their desire to deliver that. They have an outcome focus. They're not directionless pools of people. There is one leader, but the way in which they go about their work is up to them. On the right-hand side, we have the shared service concept that many CDOs will recognise. That has a simplification focus, and it's the red boxes. So they look to make consumption easy. So at the front end, your reports, your metrics, your analytics, as easy and as consumable as possible. They look to integrate first from a delivery perspective, so they're always looking to try and unify information. And they also look to ingest information before anybody needs it in the world of big data. Whereas the holacratic units are line of business focused. They start with a minimum viable product. They start with a pilot with information that's of insufficient quality for rollout, and they build and morph applications effectively through that process. And each one of those is a line of business approach. So this balancing of quality and agility, this ingestion first, governance second, quality third approach is the challenge that we all have going forward. So we move to why fast data needs fast culture. I think culture was mentioned by my predecessor. And are we approaching a Darwinian evolution of the PCs? Yes, I'm sorry, it's early in the morning. I'm working hard here to try and get a laugh, but we'll see where we go. So CDOs need to evolve rapidly. I'm not quite sure where we are. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I'll leave you up to decide where you are on this evolutionary scale. But fast data needs fast culture. You can't deliver fast data with technology alone. The culture which provisions that insight needs to be just as fast. Organisation and process constraints are the biggest killers of CDO agility. Politics is probably the next one. It's legacy thinking, not legacy systems, that's holding us back, and that's all that stands between the CDO and our IP. CDOs need to be inherently value-driven. We talked about governance, it's important, but to me it's the least important thing in the market that we're moving to. With an ingestion-first approach to data, the CDO is no longer in control, and therefore they have to tag the line and move at pace. This is the three-point approach that I've used at numerous organisations in establishing the 90-day office for the CDO. Accelerate delivery is number one, empower exploitation is number two, and continuously improve is number three. I would say most traditional CDOs are the other way around. And the reality is that governance is now the third priority. Even in a highly regulated environment, it's difficult to catch up. The build it and they will come analogy no longer works. CDOs need to be value-driven at their core. They need to provide information at different speeds. They need to empower the business and make them self-sufficient with technology. And they need to then drive improvement across functions. It is a very difficult role to please. So it's all about critical inflections. It's the Jerry Maguire syndrome, show me the money. So accelerating delivery. We need to capture key interactions faster and wider than ever before. If we cannot monetize our data, it's not worth doing. Or, at the very least, in a highly regulated environment, if we cannot reduce risk or mitigate risk, it's not worth doing. Data now needs to be delivered before the quality and formatting are consumption ready, and this is a real tipping point for data professionals. It's all about unlocking interactions. Critical inflections are focal to our success as Chief Data Officers. Acceleration starts with relentless business alignment. Which critical interactions are we trying to improve between our customers, partners, and increasingly employees in the back office? And in fact, the digital agenda now, digital transformation, is actually, ironically, increasingly back office focused, not front office focused. It's about driving those interactions. To drive those interactions, you need the right information at the right time. And with decision times falling, you need to focus in order to succeed. So why is it my way or the highway as the CDO? I developed something called the 46 Ways, which are the 46 analytical outcomes. This was done at Zurich, and whilst I can't share the details of that with you, it's based on the proverbial Rubik's Cube. It looks at various capabilities, and it looks at whether we want to be balanced or advanced in those capabilities. So it might be something like your pricing models or your fraud and risk approach. It could be your sales and distribution interaction with customers. But the point here is, it is my way or the highway when it comes to the CDO. It needs to be about analytical outcomes, and they need to be mapped over a 1 to 2 year window of transition. Specific business capabilities will improve. Some will require speed improvements, some will require quality improvements, and it's this alignment that drives the next best course of action in each of these use cases, in each of these analytical approaches. Innovation is driven by behavior, not by KPIs. Fast data does mean fast culture. These are the 9 principles that I put in place to drive behaviours at Zurich. And I'm not going to go through them in detail. I'm happy to share them with you later. But in the centre, we drive data innovation in less than 90-day agile delivery cycles. That's the heart of the CDO going forward. It's collaborative, it's top-down, it's outcome-driven. And it has to have a demise-to-rise approach. Every time you improve something, you have to remove something. Otherwise, it's pointless. So the IP and the knowledge also has to be retained as you go through. It's a difficult act. So the 3-speed organisation is about 3 gears. CDOs need to be scooters, not trains. Exploitation, if you empower business users at the exploitation level, you reduce the integration effort at the back end that's actually required. Gear 1 is about speed over quality. It provides what's called the Wrangler view. We have Trifactor here today. They have wrangling technologies, one example. Second gear is about balance without scale. You now have something that's a little bit more fit for purpose, but you can't necessarily scale it across all lines of business. And the third gear is about scale without agility. It's become very useful, it's become very valuable. Gear 1 has proven its value. Gear 2 has proven that it can be used in a business context. Gear 3 rolls it out across the functions. And these transitional views and the push of capability to the front area, the Wrangler area, the exploitation layer, is what's happening now in most organisations. So relentless exploitation is necessary. Empowering exploitation, step 2. The CDO needs versatile skill sets. It's what I call versatilists. And now the skills are all about cross-functional consumption, the ability to wrangle data across areas quickly without having to wait for a long integration chain to deliver it. Open data, data science and academy concepts, hackathons. This is the world of the data practitioner going forward. We need to be more self-sufficient and exploitation-focused. And it's in motion that's our next challenge. CDOs must combat motion sickness. We need to lay today's approaches to data to rest, or at rest if you're a data architect. On-demand schemas, the idea of ingest first and then quality assure second, are the order of the day. The burden of data management will grow exponentially as we move to in-motion movement of data away from at rest. And that is something that few of us are ready for. So in-motion is a new approach. The CDO focus today at the top, and the CDO focus in terms of relative effort at the bottom as we move towards the world of in-motion. You can see here that we move from governing the endpoint to governing the entry point. CDOs become the gatekeepers, not the consumption controllers, the content providers. And the effort, the data management effort of managing a schema that is deployed to the business before you have a data model is way harder than what we deal with today. Those of you who've seen the wildlife bridges in Holland, let all the little furry animals cross, not the chief digital officer or the chief exec though, I let them walk across the road. But the fundamental thing here is that we need to insulate our digital highways from in terms of data. We must insulate our customer experience from our data complexity. It's about wrappers and veneers, beat legacy integration fears, if you want it in a slogan. Insight needs to be simple and reusable, but it also needs to be protected in terms of how the business access that information. So data is now a consumer goods business. This is an example of the PACE layers represented. So we have frictionless digital at the top, we have revenue, cost and risk drivers on the left-hand side, and then we have the world of data, internal and external, open data, mixed data platforms at our core. We have unification and delivery capabilities. So the middle box is gear 3, the center box is gear 3, the middle box is gear 2, and the consumption services at the front is gear 1. And we need to be able to insulate through that. One of the technologies I've used in my time at Zurich is Denodo, who are here today, so I've represented that on the slide. The fact is that consumption services are the new vendor battleground. Open partner and internal data need to be mixed quickly, and success needs an insulation layer to do this. Traditional approaches are too slow. So consumption, if you'll pardon the really poor pun, is not in our genes today. Those of you who remember 501s, the Wranglers, the reality is that as the Wrangler emerges, there are 501 big data and data technologies at the moment, and that number is growing rapidly. It's probably more than 501, but it wouldn't be funny if I didn't say 501. So we need to move from specialist creation skills to the era of the Wrangler. And really, it's about empowering data cowboys and ninjas, not unicorns, in the process. We don't need to be rocket scientists to deliver an algorithm or to deliver an analytical outcome. Actually, what we need to do is make that more of a commodity going forward. So the tooling and training focus should be about business empowerment, not building a fleet of data scientists. Actually, we want to reduce that. We are in skill sets transition from structured to unstructured skills. We're moving from file generators to insight collaborators. So Wrangler skills are very different than those in use today. And business data workers need to spend 80% of their time exploiting information, not integrating it. So at the moment, unstructured, data blending, and workflow and logic-related skills are the true deficit that we have across our business areas. And most business capabilities don't have that, and many IT capabilities don't have the acumen to deliver it. So business and IT data skills need to merge with data science going forward. In my role at Zurich, it was about merging the actuary and the data scientist into a hybrid, and that was, I think that was more akin to Alien, to be honest with you, than I'm not sure whether we achieved that outcome, but that's literally where we need to go. Step 3 is continuous improvement. It's about putting data at the heart of what we do. I'm a big believer that if we empower people for exploitation of data, if we enable them to access the data in the way that they choose without control, governance is self-sustaining. Putting the thud factor of a 300-page document down on the desk and saying this is our data governance strategy really doesn't work. Giving people the ability to create analytical capabilities and giving them the flexibility to do it makes them passionate about that. With passion comes self-governance, and I think that means the CDO needs to morph to be a mediator rather than a controller of governance. It's now governing in-motion data activities that's our main challenge. Ingested data, which is what everyone's starting to do now, ingest reams of data, documents, it has limited structure. So we need to move our quality from structure quality, our quality focus, to interaction-based quality. How are we improving the interactions as we use this data going forward? And technology will need to bridge this gap. It hasn't quite got there yet, but our ability to detect, improve, and deliver data on the fly is really where a lot of the vendor focus is right now. So as we wind down, how do we orchestrate for improvement? Is there an app for that? Is there an app for improvement? Well, we're in the sharing economy. And this operating model of sharing information is key to continuous improvement. We do need an app store approach. In fact, at Zurich, we had an app store approach. We put apps in the hands, data blending and data visualization apps in the hands of the consumers. And they built their own insights and shared them through an app store construct. Using a combination of tools, but Alteryx and ClickSense, I believe, were two of the primary components at that front end, which are App Store approaches to sharing algorithms, sharing visualizations. You need to share this type of information across the consumption areas in order for people to use it and to improve it. And if business wranglers can basically share and augment this information in situ, The quality and governance, as I said, will self-sustain. So CDOs need obsessive alignment disorder, not obsessive integration syndrome, which is the realm of the CIO. They need to align relentlessly to improve. The CDO role is about juggling alignment of approach, behavior, insight, and benefit. That's what these 4 boxes represent. You need to establish operating behaviors. These are the 4 core operating behaviors I tried to establish in my previous roles. The alignment benefits, customer insulated, 80% exploitation. It's about getting agreement across the C-suite that that's what we're trying to do. On the right, you will have specific improvements in speed and quality across particular areas of insight. And on the left, you have the proverbial L and the big red box. The L is the CDO defending the entry point of the data, blending open data, blending closed data inside your organization, and basically unifying data provision to the organization. With the red areas, which are now the realm of the wrangler, they're lines of business focused. They innovate at interaction, and they have a degree of power in how they do that and how they share that information away from the CDO office. The CDO must defend the entry point but release interaction innovation. And consumption has to be distributed. It can't be centralized, vertically focused, and it needs to be free of IT shackles. They need to be able to work without IT intervention. So winding down, the API economy is now business class. Traditional business design is now a flight risk. API economy has turned design on its head. We now need a proactive and value-based approach to integration and data asset exploitation. Design improvement now starts with competencies that you're trying to create rather than efficiencies that you're trying to drive. If we look at this from an API strategy, on the left is the world today that we work in as CDOs, the traditional world. We start with efficiency. How many of you start with revenue generation? Most of us start with get that cost out of the organization. That drives an efficiency mentality. And you move up through the partners that you support, through the channels that you're trying to support, up through the traditional design to the business. It's an inside-out approach. Continuous improvement is now powered by a relationship and ecosystem approach. It's driven on the right-hand side by competencies first. What interactions and competencies are we trying to improve? What ecosystems does this improvement touch? What are the relationships we're trying to drive? And it moves down to leverage. To succeed going forward, we need to build, adapt, and deploy APIs in days, not months. And that means we need to deploy analytics and consumption in days, not months. So it's about driving, improvement means CDO, not OCD thinking. And in CDO, I mean customer, digital, and open. The CDO needs to embrace and replace data assets and needs to be customer-centric in focus. It's the polar opposite of the CIO traditionally. And we need to be enabling digital, and we need to be opening up data access rather than closing it down. I'll leave you with one example of a holacratic unit in progress at Zurich. 3 weeks, 3 people, 1 role. Pricing intelligence. 29,500 lines of SAS code. Losing the will to live within 15 minutes of starting this engagement. 29,500 lines of SAS code for 1 pricing product line amongst many hundreds in this organization. Multiple file imports, heavy preparation. When anything went wrong, you had to rerun the whole process. File storage overload, code Armageddon, and a pricing cycle that would run 500 times before conclusion on an average of 5 minutes per cycle. We took a single virtual feed. We looked at what was actually needed to run the pricing cycle rather than the spaghetti that was delivering it in the current model. We looked at using XML data directly out of the pricing application, and we basically put it in the hands of wranglers rather than in the hands of an operation run environment. The process took 3 weeks. We looked at 10% of the code base only, and then we basically virtualized this approach to show what was possible for pricing. The result in 3 weeks, with this single goal of speeding up the pricing cycle, was a process that was 5 times faster and 10 times cheaper on only 10% of the code base. Now that's the kind of thinking, for me, that a CDO should be driving. Pilot by pilot. These pilots have a tendency to become reality. So I'll leave you with agile CDOs accelerate, empower, improve, openly to unite outcomes. It's a case of A-E-I-O-U. A for accelerate, capture cash positive but wider interactions. E for empower. We need to develop cross-functional wrangling skills in our business areas. I for improve. We need to focus on in-motion data primarily to improve going forward. O for open, embracing the principles of the API and sharing economy. U for unite. We need to unite and focus to deliver shared outcomes. Thank you very much.